I really didn't have any serious training in painting. I feel that I'm a self-taught painter. I went to RISD for 2 years after high school. My art teacher thought I should, and I wasn't particularly consumed by art. I was more interested in sports and boys, but RISD showed me that art was a really important part of life. That's how I first got to know Rhode Island. I majored in painting the second year, and then after the second year, my parents wanted to know what I was going to do with this degree I was supposedly getting. And I said, well, I don't know. And they said, well, you have to leave college and learn to type. So I left college and went to Boston and then learned to type. The typing was good. Actually, I liked learning typing, and I had a skill when I went looking for a job. So I had lots of different jobs in Boston. And then there was an opportunity to go to New York and be a guide at the New England Pavilion, the New York World's Fair in 1964. So I applied for the job, got it, and left a week later and went to live in New York. I was a photographer at that pavilion also, and so that started me in a photography direction. Then I got a job at an advertising agency when the fair was over. And I was a secretary there, and then I became the assistant photographer. And I started making papier-mâché jewelry and working at the advertising agency. And I would stay up until 3 in the morning doing the papier-mâché. So somebody said to me, why don't you take your jewelry to Vogue magazine? And I did, and they put it on the cover, life-size, 12 pages. So I was heavily into the papier-mâché jewelry of the 60s and the 70s. Then I started noticing the New Yorker covers and started submitting very, very naive drawings because I thought it was a really easy thing to do, and I ended up submitting to the New Yorker for 9 years. I'm glad they didn't buy them then. Meanwhile, I got married, had 2 children, 2 girls, Scranton, Pennsylvania, and had a studio, a painting studio, and started doing abstract paintings. In 1974, a friend of mine who worked at the New Yorker told me that there was a new art director, and why didn't I submit all my old cover ideas, including the new work. So I did. I went in there and did that. And I got a note from the new art director, Lee Lorenz, please see me. And I thought, oh my gosh. So I went in and he said, I really like these abstracts. Didn't pay any attention to the other ones, thank God. So I said, well, I don't know what to paint. What should I paint? He said, well, what I like about these abstracts is I like the close relationships of colors and the division of space. The New Yorker needed an image that wasn't totally abstract, so he said, paint what you like. And I found that architecture gave me the shapes and colors, parts of architecture, was a jumping off point for me. And I took my camera and went up to a friend's apartment and took a picture of her hallway with some architectural details and went back the next week, and he said, well, I think we're going to buy this one. And I started to shake and I couldn't believe it. So that was Good Friday, 1974. That's when it started. And then 20 years later, after 58 covers, along the way there were many, many different adventures because of the New Yorker, and I will always be grateful for having that experience with them. As the 20 years went on, I really learned and became more interested in painting. I consider them paintings. Some people call them illustrations, but they were all based on my idea. I feel sometimes illustrations are illustrating other people's ideas, and these were all my ideas because they were from my own photographs. I learned to paint looking at my own photographs. I used to love looking at the photograph with a magnifying glass to get ideas about how to put paint on, because it's so grainy sometimes, and I'm just in love with photography. I don't look at something and say, oh, that would make a good painting. I just shoot from the hip, so to speak. And when I make the decision to make a painting from a photograph, I don't grid or anything, I just simplify and use the shapes. I would never paint a whole house, for instance. I would paint part of one or something that tells a little story but not the whole story. But it makes me remember my past and associate, and it just feels very authentic to me. Painting from photographic life. I wanted to come back to New England as a so-called grown-up and see what it was like. In 1987, I moved back here after living in New York City and got a house. I was looking for a studio outside my home, and Herb Weiss in Pawtucket found this building. It was an old donut factory. 3 of us bought the building, and there are now 2, myself and Mimo Gordon-Riley on the other side. I have a heated floor, which is really nice, and a little stove. Music and food and peace and quiet. We've been here about 8 or 9 years, but it took a year to renovate it, and I've never been happier about a project. Lately, I've been starting on a black gessoed canvas. I put the photograph up, looking at the photograph, and transcribe different sections of the photograph onto the painting, onto the linen, and then start with turpentine-laden paint, thin layers, and keep mixing and painting and putting it on. And there's a point where I drop the photograph. I'm interested now in really the process and where it will lead me. I'm not literally glued to the photograph. I have a series now that's very, very different. There's more light, there's more paint, more layers. I still have dreams of putting more paint on. I've made a couple of paintings where I've stopped before they're finished. That's the painting, and actually they're a couple of my favorites. The mantra that I always use is paint what you like. It's a simple process, really. So I'm still exploring, being in the studio and listening to music, take a nap now and then. It's been a very rich career, and I had no idea. I just went naively. I showed up at the meetings, I answered the phone calls, I did what I was told. When I look back on all this, it's very, very hard to believe that it all happened to me. So I'm still trying to be true to myself and take advantage of the growth and what I've learned by studying more about painting. Still feel I'm on my own track. It's just very satisfying. I'm very lucky at my age to have something that I'm passionate about.